Across the Atlantic, the 13 colonies grew restless. Taxes without a say. Protests turned to gunfire. Britain faced something new. Subjects who called themselves Americans? With French money and muskets on their side, the colonies broke away. Britain lost a continent, but kept its navy, its credit, and its nerve. The question was, where would that ambition turn next? The answer was south, to oceans Cook had mapped. In 1788, Britain planted a penal colony at Sydney Cove in the land down under. From prison ships came a new society. Wheat fields followed the chains, a far offshore became a future home. At home, ideas were changing even faster than borders. Steam engines shook mines and mills, iron and coal fed machines that made cloth by the mile. Railways stitched towns to ports and ports to the world. Industry wasn't just work now, it was a force of nature. One more experiment reshaped the island itself. In 1801, London fused with Dublin under a new name, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. Union produced scale. Scale produced reach, but reach casts a long shadow. Britain now had the ships, the banks, and the factories. It could move faster and strike farther than all of its rivals. The only real choke left for the island empire was a single man in France. So what happened when unstoppable ambition met the one and only Napoleon? Well, Napoleon tried to strangle Britain at sea, but in 1805, Admiral Horatio Nelson met the combined French and Spanish fleets off Cape Trafalgar.
You may have a bigger fleet, but I have bigger masts!
Bigger masts? How dare you, insolent English scum!
What you gonna do about it? Ha ha ha!
Crush this Earl Grey drinker now!
These are my waters! You can't outmaneuver me!
With that, Nelson broke the French and Spanish lines and crushed them. Nelson died on deck, but the victory wrecked Napoleon's navy and any hope of invading Britain. With the channel safe, Britain outlasted him on land and watched Europe redraw itself again. The navy was now more than a shield, it was a world-spanning highway. Industry roared. Telegraph wires sprinted ahead of ships. A message could cross oceans in hours, not months. Cotton came from India, wool from Australia, tea from China, manufactured goods out, raw materials in. A cycle that made London the banker of empires. And that empire grew in Africa and Asia as well. Treaties, protectorates, which were used under British control, and, when those failed, wars. In South Africa, for example, Boer commandos ambushed with speed, then vanished, all while civilians suffered in grim camps as the British ground the resistance down. Expansion worked, but at a rising moral price. At home, the Industrial Revolution cut both ways. Cities boomed, but so did slums. Children worked long hours while reformers pushed back. Sewers, schools, and votes widened, but never fast enough for the people at the bottom. Britain's march of progress had a limp. And then, across the Irish Sea, disaster struck. First order of business, has anyone seen the potatoes? Not in the nets.
Not in the hills?
They were there at sunrise. Reports say a fungus is to blame.
Can we talk it out?
We tried. It doesn't negotiate.
Next item, finding anything that isn't a potato?
In 1845, potato blight, a fast-spreading plant disease, hit the crop. It returned in the following years, ruining harvest after harvest. Famine hollowed villages. Many sailed for America. Others stayed and buried the loved ones they'd lost. The Union survived on paper, but the wound never fully closed. Over in Asia, the East India Company's rule had bred resentment, to say the least. Sepoys, or Indian soldiers, served under British officers. Annexations and new rules cut into pay, custom, and pride. So, in 1857, a spark, rifle cartridges rumored to be greased with animal fat, set off an uprising across North India. The revolt failed, but forced London to take action by ending the experiment of the East India Company. With the company no longer in control, India passed to the crown. And Victoria took on a new title, Empress of India. I bet my bottom dollar that she had no idea what that even meant. By the late 1800s, Britain stood at its widest stretch. A quarter of the world's land, hundreds of millions of people, railways across continents, cables under seas, but rivals were catching up. Germany forged steel. The United States built giant factories. The balance began to tilt. And then, a gunshot in the Balkans. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand set the fuse for something bigger than any empire. The machines and methods Britain had perfected in peace were about to be used in war. But how does the world's largest empire survive the world's first industrial war? Following the assassination in 1914, the world caught fire. Britain marched in with pride. Red uniforms swapped for khaki, horse charges replaced by machine guns. Men signed up in droves, thinking it would be over by Christmas. But it wasn't. The trenches turned Europe into a graveyard. Mud, gas, barbed wire, millions died for yards of ground. Britain's empire poured men and supplies into the slaughter. Canadians, Indians, Australians, New Zealanders. When the guns finally fell silent in 1918, Britain stood on the winning side, but not untouched. A whole generation was gone. The empire had never stretched wider, but its spirit was cracked. Could it still hold together? The 1920s tried to rebuild, and the 1930s tried to forget. But across the channel, a storm was forming. Germany was rising again, faster, angrier, and better armed. Britain hesitated, hoping treaties could tame it. They couldn't. In 1939, Hitler invaded Poland. Britain declared war. Within a year, most of Europe had fallen, leaving Britain standing alone. The Blitz hammered its cities night after night, yet the island held on, helped by radar, codebreakers like Alan Turing, and sheer stubbornness. Then came a twist. Both the United States and the Soviet Union joined the fight. Slowly, the Allies clawed Europe back. D-Day, Normandy, Berlin. It all came to a climax in 1945. When the war ended, Nazi Germany was gone, along with the world Britain had ruled. Because while Britain had won the war, it had burned through its fortune to do it. The empire was broke, scattered, and surrounded by colonies that now wanted freedom. So how do you keep an empire when it doesn't want to be one anymore? Britain had survived the war, but peace brought a new kind of pressure. The empire was cracked, broke, and restless. India moved first. Years of protest and Gandhi's nonviolent marches made British rule impossible to defend. In 1947, India split into two nations, India and Pakistan, and the jewel of the empire was gone. One domino fell, and others followed. Africa, the Caribbean, the Middle East, one by one, colonies claimed independence. Britain didn't fight to keep them this time. It signed treaties, lowered flags, and watched its empire dissolve. But something unexpected rose from its ashes: the Commonwealth. Dozens of former colonies chose to stay linked, not by force, but by shared language, history, and trade. A new network grew where the empire had stood. At home, Britain was rebuilding too. Bombed cities were recrafted as concrete and glass. The National Health Service was born, promising free care from cradle to grave. Immigration from the former empire reshaped its streets and accents. London became a world city in more ways than one. But the island still shrank. In 1997, Britain handed Hong Kong back to China, the final colony. For the first time in centuries, the British Empire no longer existed. And yet, Britain endured. Smaller, different, still standing, but in a world now ruled by superpowers, what would Britain become without its empire? The empire was gone, but Britain wasn't. It had to reinvent itself, and it had to do it fast. Instead of ruling the world, it joined it. Britain became a founding voice in NATO, the United Nations, and the G7. It poured investment into finance, technology, and culture. London shifted from imperial capital to global crossroads, where bankers, artists, and street food stalls crowded the same postcodes. But the old fractures never fully healed. Scotland pushed for more autonomy. Wales gained its own parliament. Northern Ireland's peace was held together by a fragile agreement signed in 1998, the Good Friday Agreement, after decades of violent conflict known as the Troubles. For the first time in years, it felt like the UK might finally be pulling together. Then came a shock. In 2008, a global financial crash slammed Britain's economy. Austerity followed, deep spending cuts that reshaped public life. Frustration simmered. Politicians turned the focus outward to the European Union. The question became, should Britain even stay in it? In 2016, voters said no. Brexit fractured the map again. England largely voted to leave, while Scotland and Northern Ireland voted to stay. After years of arguments and delays, Britain finally left the EU in 2020. The world watched, unsure if it was renewal or retreat. Today, the UK is smaller, louder, and more diverse than ever. Also, a bit scarier if I'm being honest. Wouldn't want to be caught waving your own flag now, would ya? Yikes! Centuries with global reach left it with deep ties and cultural weight. Music, media, science, sport, but also old ghosts that still spark debate. So what does it mean to be Great Britain, when the empire is long gone and the world no longer waits for your lead? The short answer, adaptation.